What if the true nature of Jesus was not merely that of a prophet, healer, or moral teacher, but rather that of an initiate into ancient mysteries as old as the universe itself, a knower of the four invisible pillars that uphold all reality: earth, water, fire, and air? What if every miracle we know was not a simple supernatural act, but a symbolic code, a sacred application of the conscious manipulation of these fundamental elements? What you believed to know about Christ may just be a shadow of what has truly been hidden for centuries. The great civilizations of antiquity, Egyptian, Sumerian, Greek, and even the spiritual traditions of the East, not only recognized the four elements as forces of nature, they revered them as living expressions of divine consciousness, the very same cosmic building blocks used by the Creator in the weaving of the world: earth to shape form, water to generate life, fire to illuminate and transmute, air to communicate the invisible. And among these cultures emerged the figure of a man whose presence seemed to unify all these principles: Yeshua of Nazareth, the Christ. In the canonical Gospels, Jesus is described as someone who calms storms, transforms matter, crosses dimensions, and heals bodies with a simple touch. But what many do not realize is that behind these narratives there is a pattern, the deliberate interaction with the four elements. And we are not talking about metaphors, we are talking about real practices, often hidden in codes and symbols, secretly preserved by initiatory schools and mixed with public teachings to protect their integrity. The concept of the elements dates back to the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, to Pythagorean philosophy, and to the spiritual science of ancient Egypt. They were not just metaphors, but real energies manipulable by those who understood their essence. And it is precisely at this point that we enter a territory forbidden by the centuries. Jesus not only knew these hidden laws, he mastered them, not as stage magic but as elevated spiritual technology, as an expression of an expanded consciousness that saw beyond the illusion of separation. The Dead Sea Scrolls, found in the caves of Qumran, reveal practices of the Essenes, a community that many scholars believe directly influenced Jesus in his youth. These texts describe purification rituals with the elements, invocations of natural forces, and communions with entities linked to nature. For the Essenes, the elements were living angels, intelligences with which one could commune. Christ, therefore, did not emerge from nothing. He was shaped in an ancient spiritual broth, where the elements were a central part of the initiation. The problem is that, over the centuries, institutionalized Christianity has suppressed this mystical vision. The cosmic Christ, aligned with natural cycles, was replaced by a figure that is exclusively moral, devoid of its connection with the earth, with the stars, with the very energetic body of the human being. What was sacred and practical became abstract and dogmatic. But the evidence still echoes in the forgotten corners of the scriptures, in the between the lines of the apocryphal texts, and in the traditions preserved by hidden orders and esoteric schools. There is an interpretive key that can completely change the way we view the Gospels. Each miracle can be read as a veiled lesson about the conscious manipulation of the elements. The multiplication of loaves and fishes, earth and water, walking on the sea, water and air, the transfiguration, fire, the breath of the Spirit, air, the healing of the blind man with mud, earth and water. These are more than just stories. They are spiritual codes. They are signs of a full dominion over natural forces, transcending common physics. This wisdom was not exclusive to Jesus. It was also found among the Magi of Chaldea, the masters of Tao, the shamans of pre-Columbian America. But what set Jesus apart was his ability to integrate all of this into a single body, into a single consciousness, revealing that humans are, in essence, a reflection of the divine, and that mastery of the elements is the path back to the original unity. In this context, Jesus ceases to be merely a messenger and becomes a mirror. He didn't come just to save, but to remind, not to impose a creed, but to demonstrate a state of being. When we understand that he represented the absolute balance between earth, water, fire, and air, we also understand that this balance is available to all of us, but it was intentionally hidden by structures that feared collective awakening. The knowledge of the elements allows us not only to understand miracles, but to live them. Each person is a microcosm, a miniature universe where these four principles dance incessantly. When we learn to harmonize them, we awaken the same inner Christ who moved mountains, who resurrected the dead, who spoke with the wind and with the fire. And it all begins with a simple shift in perception. Perhaps miracles are not exceptions, but reminders. Therefore, as we delve into this forgotten teaching, we unearth more than spiritual truths. We rediscover the manual of creation, the map of awakened consciousness, and the most hidden legacy left by the one who dared to call men gods. The question now is not whether Jesus manipulated the elements. The question is, when were we convinced that this was impossible? The earth has always been a symbol of solidity, nourishment, and permanence. It not only sustains our bodies, but represents, at the deepest levels of spirituality, the ability to make the invisible visible. In almost all ancestral traditions, the earth was treated as a living entity, a maternal consciousness that receives and transforms everything that is deposited in it, including our own thoughts and intentions. And interestingly, it is exactly in this realm of matter, of the concrete, that we find the clearest signs that Jesus not only knew this mystery, but used it with surgical precision. One of the most enigmatic miracles narrated in the Gospels is the healing of the man born blind using mud and saliva. By mixing earth and his own essence, Jesus creates a living substance, applying it to the man's eyes and asking him to wash in a specific fountain. At first glance, it seems like a simple ritual act, but there is a hidden secret in this action. The combination of earth, matter, with water, flow, and saliva, inner word, forms an alchemical triangle of transformation. At this moment, Jesus is not just healing a body, he is recreating a perception, shaping reality with his hands, like a divine craftsman. This action directly refers to Genesis, where God creates man from the dust of the earth and breathes into his nostrils the breath of life. The clay, therefore, is a symbol of the beginning of creation. Jesus is reenacting this primordial moment, restoring not only the physical vision, but also the spiritual vision of that man. He demonstrates that the original creative power is not confined to a mythical past. It is present and accessible to those who understand the secrets of the earth as an extension of divine consciousness. But Jesus did not act only with symbolic gestures. There are multiple records in the Gospels of physical healings, food multiplications, and manipulation of material structures, all phenomena linked to the earth element. The multiplication of loaves and fishes, for example, is not just a gesture of compassion in the face of the crowd's hunger. It is an act of matter transmutation, of substance expansion from an origin point. This suggests an intimate understanding of the laws that govern natural abundance and mastery over the morphogenetic fields that organize physical reality. It is also through the earth element that the vibrational field where miracles occur is established. Each healed body, each reverse deformity, each restorative touch indicates that Jesus possessed a type of energetic resonance that reorganized the cellular information of the bodies around him. He did not challenge matter, he deeply understood it. He knew that illness often is a reflection of an imbalance between internal and external elements, and by touching the inner earth of another, he reconfigured its original harmony. In esoteric teachings, the human body is seen as a temple of four pillars, each element governing an essential function. Earth is associated with the physical body, the bones, the density. It is through it that our ideas become actions, our feelings become matter, our soul anchors in the three-dimensional plane. In healing bodies, Jesus was showing us that true spirituality begins with reconnecting with this temple, not with its denial. The sacred is not beyond the body, it is within it. The figure of Jesus also moves naturally through natural environments. He climbs mountains, walks through deserts, teaches by the edge of lakes. There are no luxurious temples, no palaces. His chair is the ground, his chapel, the field. He seems to silently tell us that it is with our feet on the earth that we reach the sky. This is a radical inversion of religious logic that, for centuries, treated the physical world as an obstacle to enlightenment. For Christ, the earth is not the enemy of the soul. It is the womb where the spirit becomes flesh. Another crucial point is Jesus' stance towards poverty. He does not view scarcity as something natural or virtuous. Instead, he confronts it with miracles of supply. He acts, manifests, transforms. This shows that the earth element is not just the ground beneath our feet, but the principle of material abundance aligned with spiritual purpose. When well understood, this element allows us to live with dignity, health, and structure. Therefore, to deny matter is to deny the divine plan itself. There is also a key symbol in the seed. Jesus uses various parables related to agriculture, planting, and harvesting. He understands Earth's timing. He knows that for manifestation to occur, it is necessary to sow consciously, care patiently, and reap at the right time. This wisdom of rhythm, cycle, and persistence is intrinsically linked to the earth element, and in teaching with these metaphors, he is passing on practical instructions on how to align our lives with the natural flow of the cosmos. Jesus' healing teachings also indicate a deep understanding of the energy of places. There are times when he withdraws to certain areas, such as the desert or sacred mountains, to pray and strengthen himself. This suggests that he perceived the earth as a living organism, with points of strength, vortices, and energy centers that amplify or balance the connection with the divine. This view is shared by traditions such as feng shui, indigenous maps, and druidic circles. Again, we see a universal knowledge acting under different layers. Finally, perhaps the deepest of teachings related to earth is this: we are stardust, but we are also sacred clay. The matter that forms our bodies is not an evolutionary accident, but a divine instrument for consciousness to express itself. Jesus showed us, with his own incarnation, that the divine does not fear matter. It embraces it, it transforms it, it elevates it. And that's why the true miracle is not in denying the body, but in making it a living channel of the divine presence. In the symbolic vastness of the elements, water holds a privileged place. It is the silent mother of life, the channel that connects the depths to the surface, the substance that carries memory, emotion, and spirit. And in no figure of Western spiritual history does water appear so recurrently and significantly as in the trajectory of Jesus. He not only interacts with water, he dominates it, sanctifies it, and transforms it into the ultimate symbol of inner transfiguration. To understand this mystery, we first need to understand what water truly is in its spiritual essence. Since ancient civilizations, water has always been more than a physical resource. It was a bridge between worlds. In Egypt, the Nile was seen as a cosmic river. In India, the Ganges was considered a sacred liquid that purifies karma. Among the Hebrews, the waters of the Jordan did not just bathe, they consecrated. And it is precisely there that Christ emerges to the world. His baptism by John is not a symbolic rite, it is an activation. It is the moment when the Christic energy fully merges with human consciousness. In the living waters of Jordan, Jesus is not just presented, he is initiated. This baptism is a powerful key. Water has the power to reprogram frequencies, dissolve densities, and carry intentions. And John's act of immersing Jesus represents more than a ceremony. It represents the reconnection with the womb of creation, with the primordial waters of Genesis, where the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. In other words, before light, there was water. It is the matrix of manifestation. By choosing this element as the portal for his public awakening, Jesus shows us that true transformation begins with emotional and spiritual purification. But the presence of water in the Gospels goes far beyond baptism. One of Jesus' first miracles was turning water into wine at the wedding of Cana, a seemingly simple act but laden with esoteric layers. Water, in its pure form, represents the unworked essence, the potential matter. Wine, on the other hand, is a symbol of the distilled spirit, of the fire that ferments the soul, of joy transformed. This transmutation points to a profound alchemical knowledge. the consciousness that, when interacting with the right element, elevates its vibration. Further ahead, we see Jesus walking on water, an act that would defy any physical logic. However, when read under the light of initiatory teachings, this act reveals something even deeper: mastery over the collective unconscious. The water, in this case, represents the emotional world, chaos, the sea of human uncertainties. Jesus walks on it not as one who defies the laws of nature, but as one who transcends dense and unstable emotional states. He does not sink into fear, doubt, or anguish. He walks fully above them. Another powerful moment is the encounter with the Samaritan woman at Jacob's well. There, Jesus offers living water, the kind that satisfies forever. This is not common water. It is the spiritual energy that purifies not only the body, but the heart. Jesus speaks of an internal spring, a continuous flow that springs from within when one reconnects with the sacred. This spring is the water element in its highest state, not the physical liquid, but the flow of consciousness in communion with the divine. In esoteric traditions, water is associated with the emotional body, the second chakra, the principle of receptivity. It is what feels, what welcomes, what guards, and also what stagnates when it is not moved. Rivers need to flow, seas need to stir, and human emotions need to be expressed and released. Jesus, in teaching forgiveness, in washing the disciples' feet, in weeping at the death of Lazarus, shows that spirituality is not repression, it is flow. He teaches us that the water of emotions needs to be felt, not denied, and that the cleansing of the soul involves allowing these waters to circulate again. Furthermore, water is a vehicle of memory. Scientists like Masaru Emoto have demonstrated that the molecular structure of water changes according to the intention it is subjected to. Prayers, words of love and compassion, music or hatred, everything leaves impressions. This directly refers to the practices of blessing water used by various spiritual traditions. When Jesus blesses the water, and later the wine, he doesn't just give thanks. He imprints an energetic frequency capable of reconfiguring the substance around him. Another revealing point lies in the symbolism of washing. Before the Last Supper, Jesus washes the feet of his disciples, a gesture of humility, yes, but also a rite of purification. The feet represent contact with the earth, with the world. By washing the feet, he purifies the path. He resets the steps of those who follow him. It's water as a fresh start, as a rite of passage. And that's why so many masters use ritual baths, immersions, dips as a form of spiritual reconsecration. On the cross, after his death, it is said that blood and water gushed from his pierced side. This detail, which might seem minor, carries one of the greatest secrets. The water that comes from the dead body is the final offering. It is the return of the essence to the cosmic womb. It is as if Jesus' consciousness, upon leaving the body, returned to the matrix of creation, to the ocean from where everything was born. The water here is not just an element anymore. It is a sacrament. Esoteric traditions teach that each element has a movement that reconnects us with the higher self. In the case of water, this movement is the dive, the descent into the intimate, the shadow, the emotional route. It is necessary to cross the waters of pain, memory, trauma to reach the light, and this is what Jesus exemplifies in his journey. He comes into contact with human suffering, cries with those who cry, feels hunger, thirst, fatigue, but always emerges with something new: compassion. The water does not drown him, it shapes him. Therefore, water in the teachings of Jesus is not just a resource, it is a language. It is a bridge. It is a state of consciousness where the heart opens, the body purifies, and the soul expands. By mastering this element, Jesus was not demonstrating power. He was showing a path that begins with a simple gesture, that of courageously diving into the internal waters and allowing them to lead us back to the source. From the very first verses of creation, air already announces itself as the protagonist. And God said, "Let there be light." Creation begins not with hands, but with word. The word, the sound, the vibration, all are manifestations of air in its divine aspect. Jesus, as the incarnate manifestation of the Word of God, not only speaks, he creates by speaking. He moves realities with sound. And this is one of the deepest and least understood truths about his journey. His true miracle was the awareness of the vibrational power of the Word. The human word is often tossed into the wind, but the Christic word is the wind in action itself. At various times, Jesus heals with just a sentence. He says, "Rise and walk," and the body responds. He says, "Go in peace," and the soul quiets. He pronounces, "Lazarus, come forth," and death obeys. This is not rhetoric, it's pure, energetic resonance. Jesus knew the secret of frequency. He understood that everything that exists vibrates, and that the right vibration can reorganize matter, mind, and destiny. In ancient traditions, air is associated with thought, higher intellect, and inspiration, but also with the spirit, that which blows where it wishes, invisible but present. When Jesus breathes on his disciples after the resurrection and says, "Receive the Holy Spirit," he is literally transferring a spiritual frequency. It's not just a ceremonial gesture, it's a conscious vibrational act where he delivers the Ruach, the divine breath, the same one that in Genesis gave life to the dust of the earth. This breath is the vital energy that animates all forms. In the East, it is called prana, in the Jewish tradition, neshama, in indigenous cultures, the breath of Mother Earth. All these visions point to the same principle. There is an intelligence that circulates through the air, and those who understand it breathe with purpose. Jesus was a master in this flow. His prayers, his silences, his speeches, everything indicated a deep integration with the air element, as if he breathed not only oxygen, but pure consciousness. In the most critical moments, Jesus uses silence as a language. When questioned by Pilate, he remains silent. When confronted by the Pharisees, he often responds with questions. This use of the unspoken is also an expression of air. The space between sounds is as powerful as the word itself. The air carries not only what is said, but what is felt. That's why Jesus' presence would change entire environments. He carried an atmosphere, a frequency, a field that went beyond speech. In Hermetic teachings, air is the transmitter between worlds. It connects the high and low, the internal and external. It is the bridge between the body and the soul, between earth and heaven. That's why, in prophetic visions, angels descend on clouds, symbols of air in its sacred form. Jesus, upon ascending, also rises among clouds. This is not celestial geography. It is spiritual symbolism. He dissolves into the dimension of air, of spirit, of the non-material. It is the return to the realm of the Word before the form. The Sermon on the Mount is a clear expression of this dominion. When uttering words like, "Blessed are the pure in heart," Jesus is not just teaching ethics, he is planting vibrational codes in the collective field. Each beatitude is a sound wave that reverberates through the centuries, and only the air can carry these waves with such lightness and persistence. That's why air also represents time. It circulates freely, is not contained, crosses barriers. The word of Jesus travels through this vehicle and remains active to this day. It's important to remember that the disciples also received this power. When sent on a mission, they are instructed to heal, to teach, to liberate, all through the Word. What was transmitted there was not just doctrine, but a vibrational key to access higher consciousness. And how is this key transmitted? Through breathing, sound, speech. The Holy Spirit, manifested in tongues of fire, is preceded by a forceful wind. Therefore, air is the first movement of spiritual awakening. The Pharisees and doctors of the law, accustomed to the dead letter, did not understand this power. For them, what mattered was the text. But Jesus spoke with authority, not just because he knew, but because he embodied the vibration of truth. The air does not accept masks, it reveals. It spreads, it connects, it cleans. That's why, when Jesus speaks, crowds follow him. even without fully understanding, because his speech was not just sound, it was a resonant energy field. In miracles of deliverance, such as the casting out of demons, Jesus' speech is imperative. Be quiet and come out of him, and the entity obeys. This is not superstition. It is recognition of vibrational hierarchy. The air carries the command. The word, when aligned with the divine, commands lower frequencies. Jesus demonstrates this not as a power show, but as practical teaching. What comes out of the mouth has the power to order realities. Therefore, he teaches, it's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a man, but what comes out of it. Finally, the element air leads us to a more subtle understanding of Christ's presence. He is not contained in images, nor in fixed places. He is wind that blows wherever it wants. And whoever is born of the Spirit, he says, is like this wind, invisible, unpredictable, but deeply real. By reconnecting with air, with conscious breathing, aligned speech, and elevated thought, we also become channels of the Word, conductors of the living Word that not only informs, but shapes. Fire is the only one of the four elements that always points upwards. It does not settle, does not rest, does not retreat. Its nature is ascending, insatiable, and sacred. It is the invisible presence of the moving sky, the energy that cannot be touched without being deeply touched by it. In all spiritual traditions, fire is a symbol of the spirit, of enlightenment, of purification, and of transmutation. And in Jesus, we find fire incarnate, not in destruction, but in transformation. His gaze, his words, and his presence ignited a flame in the souls he touched. From the beginning, his arrival is announced with fire. John the Baptist, preparing the way for the Messiah, declares, "I baptize you with water, but the one who comes after me will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire." This is not just any metaphor. This fire is the same that descends on Mount Sinai, that burns in the bush before Moses, that accompanies the crossing of the desert as a pillar of flames. It represents the active divine presence, the awakened consciousness, the evolutionary impulse that transforms everything it touches. Jesus brings not just a new doctrine, he brings spiritual ignition. One of the most enigmatic moments in the Gospels is the Transfiguration. There, atop the mountain, in front of Peter, James, and John, Jesus is enveloped by a blinding light. His face shines like the sun, and his clothes become as white as light. This is not an aesthetic phenomenon. It is a combustion of consciousness. The spiritual fire erupts from within, revealing the cosmic Christ behind the veil of flesh. The Transfiguration is the revelation of what has always been there, the inner flame that animates the entire universe. Fire teaches us that nothing is destroyed, everything is transformed. Jesus demonstrated this when dealing with human limitations. He looked at sinners, the sick, the marginalized, and saw in them raw material for transmutation. He said, "Behold, I make all things new." The same principle of alchemical fire, not to reject, but to purify, not to deny pain, but to burn it until it turns into wisdom. Each healing, each forgiveness, each miracle is a spark that illuminates and transmutes what was once shadow. In his speeches, Jesus spoke with a fervor that set the hearts of those who listened to him ablaze. His words ignited dormant consciences. He said, "I have come to bring fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled." This statement is often ignored or softened, but it carries one of the greatest secrets. Christ came as the bearer of the spiritual flame, as the catalyst for humanity's inner evolution. This fire doesn't destroy houses. It burns masks, illusions, invisible chains. It invites the renunciation of inertia and the birth of consciousness. In the accounts of the resurrection, fire appears in a symbolic and profound way. The disciples who walk with the resurrected Jesus on the road to Emmaus say, "Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked with us on the way?" This burning is more than emotion. It is the sign of the rekindled divine spark. The presence of Christ awakens the sacred fire within each being. It is the return of the Spirit to the internal altar. It is the temple that lights up from within. In the apocryphal texts and Gnostic traditions, fire is even more exalted. Christ is described as a living flame, a logos of light that traverses worlds. And in some writings, like the Gospel of Thomas, he himself asserts, "He who is near me is near the fire." This proximity is not physical, it's vibrational. Drawing near to Christ means allowing oneself to be touched by the light that burns away the layers of the ego, fear, ignorance. And this process, although intense, is the true path of liberation. Fire is also present in acts of consecration and surrender. At the moment of crucifixion, when Jesus gives up the spirit, the temple veil tears. It is the fire of separation that ends. It's as if the flame of his final surrender burned the veils between heaven and earth. At this instant, Christ becomes accessible to all. The spark spreads. The fire is no longer confined to the altar. Now it can burn within every awakened being. On Pentecost, this vision becomes a reality. Tongues of fire descend upon the apostles. They speak in other languages, move with courage, spread the message. The fire that was in Jesus is now shared. This is the true baptism of fire, the activation of the Christ consciousness in each disciple. Christ's mission was not to be worshipped, it was to be replicated. The fire doesn't want applause, it wants fuel. That's why fire also represents the call to action. While earth grounds, water purifies, and air communicates, fire moves. It pushes the soul to the next level. It burns the comfort zone. It ignites purpose. When Jesus called someone, he said, "Follow me." There were no complex explanations, just the call. This call was fire, and whoever heard it felt their whole life catch fire from within and knew there was no turning back. Fire invites us to die to the old and be reborn to the new. That's why Jesus said, "Whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." This life is not just the physical one, but the limited identity. Christ calls for the soul's fire so that, from the ashes of the ego, the true self may be reborn. And this is the greatest miracle, not the healing of the body, but the transformation of the being. Thus, the fire in Jesus was not just a symbol, it was his very nature. He was and is the living flame. Approaching him, there is no way to remain the same. Something ignites, something dissolves, something is reborn, and the invitation continues to echo. Let me ignite what in you still sleeps, because only the fire transforms the night into dawn and the human into divine. When we talk about the most influential figures in the history of human spirituality, the contexts that surround them are often ignored. Jesus did not emerge from a vacuum. His consciousness, although transcendental, was shaped, nurtured, and prepared in a deeply advanced spiritual environment, and this environment had a name, the Essenes. A quiet, discreet, yet incredibly powerful brotherhood, operating in the shadows of the desert while the world screamed in the squares. They were the alchemists of the invisible, the gardeners of the human soul, and above all, the masters of elemental harmony. The Essenes emerged around the 2nd century BC, living in isolated communities such as Qumran, on the shores of the Dead Sea. There, far from the corrupt influences of the Roman Empire and the corrupted Jewish priesthood in Jerusalem, they dedicated themselves to preserving knowledge that came from Egypt, Chaldea, perhaps even Atlantis. Their days were structured by precise rituals, purifying baths, fasts, astronomical observations, and prayers synchronized with the cycles of nature. They were scientists of the soul and cosmos, integrating spirituality, healing, and nature into a single living practice. These wise men regarded the 4 sacred elements, earth, water, fire, and air, not as inert entities, but as living angels, conscious intelligences that governed all aspects of life. They referred to them as angels of Mother Earth and maintained daily communion with them at sunrise. The angel of earth was greeted by touching the ground, the water angel by bathing in streams, the air angel by consciously breathing on top of hills, and the fire angel by contemplating the sun. For the Essenes, connecting with the elements was the path to health, peace, and enlightenment. Jesus, as a boy, had contact with this community. There are strong indications that he was prepared among the Essenes, either living among them or receiving their indirect influence. The canonical Gospels are silent about his youth, but the apocryphal Gospels and mystical traditions speak of his upbringing in places like Egypt, India, and especially the Judean desert. And what he encounters there is not just contemplation, it's spiritual formation based on natural mysteries, which would later be reflected in every miracle, every word, every gesture. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in Qumran in 1947, there are references to practices of energetic purification, daily ritualistic baths, and alignments with lunar and solar phases, practices that echo in the gestures of Jesus. The Essenes also believed in the existence of a master of justice, a messianic figure who would emerge to restore the spiritual truth of the world. Many scholars see this prophecy as a direct foreshadowing of the coming of Jesus. Not just a coincidence, but a plan carefully nurtured for centuries of silent preparation. These masters also understood the energy flows of the human body. They spoke of the 7 force centers, what we now call chakras, and knew how to harmonize them with herbs, prayers, breaths, and gestures. Their healing practices used the 4 elements: medicinal clays, earth, infusions and immersions, water, rhythmic breaths, air, and anointing with oils consecrated to the sun, fire. Each element was activated with precision to restore the lost balance. In healing, Jesus was not innovating. He was applying an ancient spiritual science. Another crucial point is nutrition. The Essenes followed a purely natural diet based on fruits, grains, and seeds, rejecting any food of animal origin. They believed that the body was the temple of the spirit and that the ingestion of death contaminated the soul's vibration. This view is reflected in the words of Jesus in the hidden Gospels. "Do not kill the animal, for he who kills, kills himself." Nutrition was part of the internal alchemy. To eat consciously was to eat light. They did not just nourish the body, they nourished the spirit. The Essenes also understood the symbolic language of the universe. They studied the stars not out of superstition, but for wisdom. The astrology they practiced was not deterministic, but revealing of inner paths. They knew that the sky reflects the soul. Therefore, they celebrated solstices, equinoxes, and alignments as portals of power. Jesus' great speeches about the signs of the times and the kingdom of heaven echo this celestial wisdom. He saw the world as a living mirror, and this came from his hidden masters of the desert. At the heart of the Essene philosophy was the principle of unity with the whole. There was no separation between spirit and matter, human and divine, heaven and earth. They believed in a single source which manifests in all forms, and whose presence can be perceived in the breath of the wind, in the heat of the sun, in the firmness of the rock, and in the fluidity of the river. Jesus assimilated this view. His message of the kingdom of God is within you is the ultimate expression of this principle. The kingdom is not far away. It vibrates in every atom. It is the activation of the Christ consciousness within matter. This wisdom, however, was dangerous. That's why the Essenes kept themselves hidden. They knew that the power that carries freedom also attracts persecution. The knowledge of the elements, of vibrational healing, of the connection with the spirit without intermediaries was a direct threat to the religious and political power of the time. The same system that would later crucify Christ had already persecuted his silent forerunners for centuries. Therefore, much of what we know about them has reached us in a fragmented form, but enough to reconstruct the tapestry of the forgotten sacred. Finally, the Essenes represent the hidden root of the visible Christ. They were the fertile soil where the Christ seed could sprout. Their teachings echo in Jesus' speeches. Their practices are reflected in his miracles, and their philosophy intertwines with each parable. Understanding the Essenes is to reclaim the lost link between the human and the divine, between matter and spirit, between the 4 elements and the 5th, the awakened consciousness that unifies everything. Throughout human history, whenever a teaching empowers the individual and directly connects them to the divine, it is considered a threat, not to the people, but to the institutions that profit from the separation between man and God. The knowledge that Jesus carried, and that the Essenes preserved, was precisely this type of knowledge, a liberating, holistic, natural, and transformative knowledge. Therefore, it could not be allowed to flourish freely. The erasure began early and meticulously. Shortly after the crucifixion of Jesus, numerous spiritual movements inspired by his life and words emerged. Some retained the mystical essence of his teachings, orally transmitting what they had learned about the elements, energy healing, and divine consciousness. These early schools spoke of a Jesus who taught meditation, conscious fasting, connection with the earth's cycles. A Christ who revealed the kingdom of God as a state of expanded perception, not as a distant place. But this vision clashed with the emerging power structures. In the following centuries, the Roman Empire, seeking to politically unify its territories under a common religion, saw in the figure of Jesus an opportunity. But the Christ of the original Gospels was too free, too deep, too revolutionary. He needed to be adapted, and so, the Council of Nicaea, in 325 AD, convened by Emperor Constantine, marked the beginning of what we now call institutionalized Christianity. At this event, various Gospels were evaluated, and most of them were rejected. The criterion? Simple. Any text that pointed to the inner divinity, to the direct connection with God, to the mastery of nature as an extension of the soul, was classified as heretical. The so-called apocryphal Gospels were banned, hidden, burned, or simply forgotten. Writings such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of the 12 Saints, the Dead Sea Scrolls, among others, revealed a Jesus deeply aligned with the elements, meditation, vibration, a master who invited us to become like him. This was the real problem, a teaching that did not call for priests, temples, or dogmas, a knowledge that stated the body is a temple, that the air carries prayer, that water cleanses the soul, that fire purifies the consciousness, and that the earth is our ally in healing. This direct, free, natural spirituality, it was a threat to the foundation of a control system. It was more dangerous than any sword. Over time, the official Christian doctrine began to focus exclusively on blind faith, guilt, sin, and obedience. The alchemical Jesus was replaced by an institutional Christ, often distorted and dehumanized. The simple and powerful rites of the elements were set aside. The baths, the natural fasts, the communions with the sun, with the morning air, with the silence of the mountain, all of this was treated as pagan superstition. And with this, the internal portal began to close. The Inquisition, which would come centuries later, was merely the culmination of this policy. Thousands of people who maintained natural healing practices, spirituality linked to the earth, the moon, the cycles, were persecuted, labeled as heretics or witches, and brutally eliminated. The Church was not just fighting against religious dissent, it was fighting against the resurgence of the sacred feminine, the spiritual body, the autonomy of the being. Each bonfire was a cry against the light that threatened to re-emerge. But even with all this repression, knowledge did not disappear. It took refuge. It began to circulate in hidden schools, between the lines of alchemy, in the whispers of mystics, in the symbols of Gothic cathedrals, in the coded treaties of the Rosicrucians and Gnostics. The wisdom of the elements lived under disguises, waiting for a new time when it could be rediscovered, like now. Because the truth never dies, it just changes its clothes. Today, we know that many forbidden texts have reached us by miracle. The Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, remained hidden for nearly 2,000 years in caves, protected from time, war, and destruction. When they were found in 1947, they revealed an entirely different panorama of the spirituality of their time. A world where communion with the elements was central, where wisdom was practiced and not worshipped, where the divine was in everything and not confined to churches. Modern science itself is now beginning to rediscover truths that the ancient masters already knew, that breathing modifies states of consciousness, that water carries information, that sound reorganizes matter, that the earth possesses healing electromagnetic fields. Everything that was once called superstition is now returning with a scientific guise. What was witchcraft reveals itself as subtle physics. What was erased shines again. But perhaps the most important question is not just, why was this knowledge hidden, Zrania, but why is it resurfacing now? The answer is clear, because the time has come. The time when humanity no longer seeks external gurus, but turns to inner mastery. The time when we no longer accept the divine being trapped in doctrines, but flowing through rivers, through trees, through the body, through the word. The return of the elements is the return of the sacred human. Therefore, the knowledge of the elements, of the natural cycles, of the alchemy of the soul, was hidden because it freed us. And everything that liberates scares those who live off control. Jesus was not crucified just for speaking of love, but for revealing that we too are potential gods, and that the miracles he performed could be done by anyone who awakened to the truth of their nature. He who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and will do greater things than these. This was his promise, and also, for the powerful of the time, his death sentence. When we look at the miracles of Jesus with initiatory eyes, what we find are not just supernatural events, but living formulas, vibrational codes in action, where each element of nature is precisely summoned to produce a change of state in the physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual field. Jesus did not violate the laws of nature. On the contrary, he understood them in their entirety and operated in alignment with them. His miracles are demonstrations of a subtle mastery over the forces that sustain creation. Let's start with the most symbolic, the first miracle, the transformation of water into wine. Water, the element of purity, of emotional potentiality, is elevated to the condition of wine, symbol of the spirit, of celebration, of the fermentation of time. This transmutation is not accidental. It is a hidden teaching. Spirituality begins with the elevation of the emotional essence to the vibration of conscious joy. Jesus does not choose this miracle by chance. He reveals that every human being carries within them the original water, and that this water can become sacred wine with intention and faith. Another profound example is the healing of the blind man with mud and saliva. In this act, we have the earth, dust, water, saliva, and the word, intention. The creation of the new vision does not occur through magical imposition, but by reshaping from the original elements. The mud reminds us of Genesis, when man is molded from the dust of the earth. The saliva carries Jesus' internal frequency, bearing the word. The miracle here is a ritual of reconfiguration. The man's vision is restored because his matter was reprogrammed with the original code of creation. The mastery over the element of water is further revealed in two iconic miracles, walking on water and calming the storm. Both events occur on a turbulent sea, a symbol of the collective unconscious and human emotions. By walking on water, Jesus shows that those in a Christ-conscious state are not dominated by emotional chaos. He walks above fear, doubt, and distress. When he commands the sea, "Be still, calm down." Зрение. Мы видим air, слово, организующее water, эмоцию. It is the vibration of the word, pacifying the unconscious. The multiplication of the loaves and fishes is another deeply elemental wonder. Earth, wheat from the loaves, water, the fish, air, the spoken blessing, and fire, the expanding faith, are all present. Jesus doesn't create from nothing. He amplifies what already exists. This is the true teaching. Abundance doesn't come from denying reality, but from the energetic activation of available matter. When he blesses the food, Jesus vibrationally elevates it, and this alters its energetic function, allowing it to multiply and nourish hundreds. The miracle is not in the quantity, but in the frequency. In the episode of Lazarus' resurrection, the code is even deeper. Here we have the air, the call, "Lazarus, come out." The earth, the buried body, the water, the tears of those present, and the fire, the vital spark that returns. The miracle occurs because all the elements are realigned. Life does not return as an external imposition, but as an internal reorganization of vital forces. Lazarus' name is called with authority, and this activates his spark. It is the word awakening cellular memory. It is the Spirit reorganizing form. On Pentecost, after Jesus' ascension, the apostles received tongues of fire above their heads. Here, the fire symbolizes the illumination of the Spirit, the sound of the spoken tongues, air, the presence of the community, earth, and the emotional impact of the moment, water, complete the circle. The miracle here is not literal fire, but the acceleration of the being's vibration. They become conscious channels of a higher energy, and this changes their language, their mission, their courage. Jesus had promised, "You will be baptized with the Spirit and with fire," and the code is fulfilled. In exorcisms, such as the one where Jesus drives out demons with a simple verbal command, we see air acting in its purest form. The sacred word organizes the energy field, dissolving dissonant frequencies. These demons can be read as dense thought forms, trapped states of consciousness, energies crystallized by pain or trauma. By naming them and ordering their departure, Jesus deconstructs these structures with a higher frequency. The word, when aligned with the truth, has real power for energy reconfiguration. Even crucifixion carries a hidden code. On the cross, we have the four elements present at the peak of human suffering: the earth, Golgotha, the skull, the physical body, the water, the blood and water that gush from the side, the air, the last words, and the fire, the surrender of the soul to the Spirit. The cross is not just an instrument of torture, it is a mandala of transmutation, a point of intersection between the four elements, where the fifth emerges, the Christ consciousness, which transcends and unifies all others. Death, in this sense, is transfiguration. Even in parables, the elements reveal themselves: the seed that falls on fertile ground, earth; the sower who breathes words, air; the sun that warms it, fire; the rain that nourishes it, water. Jesus taught in symbolic language not to hide, but to prepare those who had eyes to see and ears to hear. His teaching was not religious, it was cosmic, vibrational, universal. It was alchemical. Jesus also used touch as a channel of transmutation. When touching a leper, for example, he breaks the taboo of the time, but not out of rebellion, rather because he knew that healing begins with the dissolution of separation. The contaminated body was seen as cursed, impure, and Jesus reintegrates it with the whole. Touch is earth, feeling is water, breathing is air, and compassion, the invisible fire that heals. This gesture is a microcosm of the miracle. There is no illness where there is unity. Upon understanding this secret language, we realize that miracles were not exceptions. They were demonstrations of spiritual laws in action. Each healing, each phenomenon, each word of Jesus carries a precise energetic structure. He did not act randomly. He followed the sacred codes of the universe, and he did so masterfully because he knew who he was. And the invitation he left us was clear: you are the light of the world. What he did, we can also do, if we align ourselves with the same vibration. Imagine for a moment that everything you need to access your true nature already lives within you, that the same elements Jesus used to heal, transmute, multiply, and resurrect are not outside, but pulsating in your body, in your breath, in your energy field. Now stop imagining, because this is reality. The great lesson that Christ left beyond words, miracles, and scriptures is this: you are the temple where the four elements dance, and where the fifth, consciousness, awakens. The earth lives within your bones, in the firmness of your presence, in your ability to uphold plans, relationships, and commitments. Every time you ground yourself in the present, when you plant an intention with clarity, when you act with consistency, you manifest the wisdom of the earth. It is your structure, your foundation, and more. It responds. When you walk barefoot on the ground, when you eat with gratitude, when you respect your physical body, you activate this ancestral intelligence. You honor the temple, and the temple responds with balance. Water circulates in every cell of your body, carrying memories, emotions, and intuitions. It is the internal river that needs to flow for the soul to remain alive. When you truly feel, when you allow tears to wash away your pain, when you dive fearlessly into your deepest feelings, you are practicing the aquatic teaching of Jesus. Water teaches you to let go, to cleanse, to trust. It is what reconnects you with your intuition, your dreams, your spiritual sensitivity. And the cleaner it is, the clearer your vision of the truth will be. Air is the invisible messenger that unites body and spirit. It is in the breath you take now. It is in the word you utter, in the thought you form. It is through air that you manifest your reality. When Jesus said, "Be it done according to your faith," he was speaking of the creative word. Today, more and more studies reveal that thoughts and words shape our bodies, our relationships, our destiny. Every conscious breath is a sacred act, and every word spoken with intention is an energetic command. Air is vibration, and vibration is the language of the soul. Fire, in turn, is the spark that pulses behind the eyes. It's the enthusiasm, the passion, the gleam in your eyes when you talk about what you love. It's the drive that moves mountains, the heat that transforms pain into courage, frustration into action. When you act with integrity, when you say yes to your deepest calling, when you burn the old to be born anew, you are tapping into the fire. Jesus was living fire. And this fire was given to all of us when he said, "You are the light of the world." Light is fire, and fire is awakened consciousness in motion. But there is a fifth element hidden and can only be perceived when the previous four are in harmony. Consciousness. It is the observer of the earth, feels the water, breathes the air, and ignites the fire. It is the point of unity, the center of the pentagram, the internal Christ. This consciousness does not belong to a religion, a temple, or a specific lineage. It is universal, eternal, and already lives within you. The true spiritual journey is not to ascend to the heavens, but to descend to the heart and awaken this silent core that integrates everything. Therefore, the teaching of the elements is not a distant esoteric knowledge. It's a map to profound self-knowledge. It teaches us that everything is interconnected, that our thoughts affect our emotions, that our emotions alter our body, that our body influences our energy, and that our energy shapes the world around us. When Jesus healed, he accessed this complete map, and now, this map is back in our hands. And how to activate it? Simple and profound. Start with the body, earth. Nourish yourself with presence, move with respect, sleep with purpose. Honor your foundation. Then release your emotions, water. Feel what needs to be felt without judgment. Allow the flow. Next, cultivate conscious thought and breathing, air. Meditate, observe your mind, breathe with intention. Then ignite your inner flame, fire. Find what drives you and let it burn with courage. Finally, contemplate the whole, consciousness. Be silent and listen. Divinity is already there. This reunion is not instantaneous. It's a process, a journey. But it's the most powerful journey there is, the return to the center where the inner Christ resides. And he doesn't expect perfection, just presence. Each step towards integration is a reminder of who you truly are. Every time you honor one of the elements, you honor the universe itself. Because you are the universe, breathing in human form. The world around us cries out for this awakening. We are surrounded by an excess of toxic air, agitated minds, contaminated waters, repressed emotions, exhausted lands, neglected bodies, and uncontrolled fires, unconscious passions. What Jesus taught us through the elements was how to restore balance from the inside out. And this is the call now, to reincarnate Christ, not as doctrine, but as a living practice. Your miracles, your words, and your presence were the demonstration of a being who had harmonized the four elements within themselves, awakening the fifth. And now, the most beautiful revelation of all, you can too. You are the clay, the river, the wind, and the flame, and above all, you are the consciousness that can choose to activate all of this. Therefore, this is not just a video, a script, a story. It's a mirror. An invitation, a reminder. The truth is not outside, it's inside. And the elements are the keys that open the door back home. You are the miracle, and the time to awaken it is now. And now, mind unfettered, I want to hear you. If the elements spoke to you today, if any part of this ancient truth touched something that was dormant within you, leave in the comments which of the 4 elements you feel needs to be awakened in your life at this moment. Is it the earth calling you to root yourself? The water, asking you to release what is trapped? The air, inviting clear thinking and conscious speech? Or the fire, begging for action, courage and transformation? Write with intention. Comment as if it were a commitment to your higher self. Because when one of us awakens, we all rise. And when many write, think, feel, and intend together, something begins to manifest. This is the magic of being here together. Mind unfettered. A community free from constraints, igniting consciousness one flame at a time. And if this video sparked something in you, wait until you see what's coming next. Click now on the video to your right. The Brotherhood of Light, the secret knowledge of Jesus that history erased. In it, we're going to dive even deeper, behind the scenes of history, into the secret orders that walked with Christ, into the hidden knowledge that echoes to this day, and that you, now awakened, are ready to receive. We are the ones who remember. We are the ones who do not fear the light. We are mind unfettered.